Few things going on in the news at the moment. The Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, has resigned today. Um, I can't remember the last time that's happened in the Church of England, where an archbishop has resigned. I think we'll have to go back some way. In Paris, Sir Keir Starmer joined Emmanuel Macron. He's actually the first prime minister it's fought since Winston Churchill in 1944 to attend the armistice events in Paris. He was in London at the Cenotaph on Sunday, but yesterday he was in Paris, and there was quite a poignant image of him and Macron on the open-top vehicle, gendarmes going down the Champs-Élysées. Um, Whatever can be said for Keir Starmer's domestic policies, I do give him credit for trying to get a reset with our closest neighbours in Europe. I think it's extremely important, particularly as Trump may well smack huge tariffs on this country. You know, Farage is having this sycophantic thing about we'll get a roll out with the red carpet for Trump. We need good relations with America, that goes without saying, but I absolutely do not agree that we need to be subservient to Trump and Trumpism. I want to talk about this analysis that Fareed Zakaria on CNN took regarding why he believes the Democrats lost, and I broadly agree with him, although I would add a bit to it. So he said they made three big mistakes. I respect Fareed Zakaria. I think he's a smart guy, and I think he talks a lot of common sense. But the three big things he highlighted was that, well, he started off with this introduction that a lot of Western countries or developed countries have seen a sort of push against the established political parties. In Japan, the ruling LDP party has um, for the first time in generations, seen serious doubt on its credibility. Um, in Germany, the coalition government of Olaf Scholz has collapsed. In Britain, we of course had the hammering of the Tories in July, and in Canada, Justin Trudeau is has very low approval ratings at the moment. In France, Macron has also seen significant pushback. So there's this trend across developed countries. But Sakari made the point Harris could have actually withstood that trend because even though she's representative of in government, she's a Democrat. She's a vice president of the Democrat administration. Um, but actually, the American economy is doing better than other G7 countries. Um, Apparently, employment's doing okay, wages are up, inflation is down. All the indicators are good, but I think the problem is that for the average American consumer, they're just not feeling it. And if the cost of living is still high, even if the economy is healthy, if people are not feeling that, it's going to have a it's going to have an effect. Um, One thing is for absolutely sure, this is my opinion. Character, the idea of supporting someone on the basis of character has utterly gone out the window. Apparently, up to 9% of people who do not like Donald Trump nevertheless voted for him. That's incredible. I've seen a lot of people say they don't like Trump. Um, I've heard people say Harris isn't popular. I don't think by any measure it can be said that Donald Trump is a hugely popular figure. Maybe with his base, but I do not believe that the, what is it, 74 million people who voted for Trump are hugely enthusiastic about him. I think you have a hardcore who are, the sort of people that would really, really go out of the way to put big Trump banners on their vehicles and so on. I think there's a lot of people who are genuinely struggling and they remember the Trump years and they think they've done better under the Trump years now. It just goes without saying that they're going to invest trust in him again. But I have seen people say, look, they don't like the manure that comes out of his mouth, they don't like the things he says, but they just think he would be a better president. So that is one thing we can observe from this election. To many American voters, character just goes out the window as a voting factor. I mean, me personally, I do think it's extremely important. I couldn't bring myself to vote for Trump. And obviously, I'm not American, but I'm not exactly, financially stable. I've got financial concerns. Would I vote for Trump if he was in Britain? Absolutely not. I just think It contradicts my values just so deeply that I couldn't support that man. Um, but what Zakaria said was valid. He highlighted several things, and I would add a few more. The big things he highlighted was firstly immigration. The Biden-Harris administration done too little, too late. I don't think they really understood how strongly people felt about this. And the polls show that feelings on this have changed in the last 4 years. Um, I think that Trump's mass deportation threats are not realistic. I don't think it's going to happen, even with congressional support. I mean, how do you deport 11 million people? Because he's not just talking about criminals like dangerous criminals, cartel members, and so on. He's talking about everyone who's undocumented. I don't think that's realistic, but there is a genuinely popular um, public sentiment for that to happen because people just think that the border can't take it. They think it's putting too much pressure on American resources. And, during the campaign, we saw the whole thing with Springfield, Ohio. Um, but there is a serious issue behind that, which is that there is pressure put on small towns in America when you get an influx of people coming in, even if they're legal. So that's an issue that Democrats, I think, underestimate. So I agree with Zakaria on that. Just get a, excuse me. I'll be putting a link to his video. Yeah, that was a big one, particularly in border states. I mean, Harris lost Arizona, she lost Nevada. Um, she won New Mexico, interestingly enough. So, what is it? What makes New Mexico different from Arizona? I'm not sure. I know Arizona is a Republican state. I guess New Mexico is a Democrat state, but it's also a border state. So, I'm not sure. Um, not sure how she maintained New Mexico, but she did. Um, So yeah, the immigration thing was a big one. The second one, I don't entirely agree on this. Zakaria said all the trials against Trump made it look kind of affirmed a lot of his supporters' belief that he was being victimized, that the system was being weaponized against him. Now, why I don't fully agree with this is because, I mean, I agree that's how Trump supporters will see it, and maybe that's why Harris lost, but I disagree with the principle because it's about the fact that nobody should be above the law. Now, if you genuinely believe in democracy, then it follows that you should believe in the rule of law. It may well be that some of those cases were being pushed harder than they should have been, and maybe they shouldn't have been priorities. I definitely think his attempts to interfere in the 2020 election in Georgia is a very serious thing. Um, Certainly, some of the allegations of rape against him are very serious. Um, I have a big problem with this idea that Trump should just be immune from justice. Um, and, he's going to enter the White House in January. It's highly unlikely that anything's going to happen now. There is a certain perverse aspect to that Trump can basically get away with all of this. I had a problem with that idea at the time. This idea that because he's being held to account, he's somehow being victimized. Zakaria did say that some of those cases are justified, but he also said it looked like weaponization. I just don't know if I agree with that. Yes, to Trump supporters, it looks like that, but it's a simple question of no one should be above the law. Why the hell should Donald Trump be above the law? I think the timing was bad leading up to an election, so it looked like the Democrats weaponizing it. But I have a big problem with this idea that, oh, we better not hold him to account because it'll look like victimization. Um, it's true that in some of those places, for example, in New York, it looked like the Democrats stitching him up, but I think Donald Trump's rotten. I really do. I believe in due process for everyone, including Donald Trump, but I really don't think this is a man falsely maligned. I think he is absolutely rotten. That's my own personal feeling. Um, Now, the third point is probably the one I agree with most of all, even more than the first one, because in the first one on immigration, the Democrats did propose a bipartisan security bill, which Trump vetoed. But the third one I really agree with because it's the one that most annoys me about the Democrats for similar reasons as the British Labour Party. And that is their obsession with identity politics and cultural war issues and woke zealotry. Zakaria made a very valid point here, and it might well be falling on deaf ears with some people in the Democratic Party. Fact of the matter is, when they spend so much time obsessing over, for example, pronouns or silencing people's opinions in universities, um, it's important that this is quantified. It is not, as Elon Musk says, mass censorship. As Tim Waltz pointed out, you don't shout fire in a crowded theatre. So there is some justification in having common sense measures against, for example, incitement, right? But I also think that the woke left is extremely intolerant. We've seen this in American campuses. Um, and Zakaria pointed out that it's ironic, for example, that the Democrats push ridiculous terms like Latinx to be gender neutral when Latinos themselves, the majority of them, don't care about that and they think it's just weird and awkward. Um, the Democrats need to, the same with the British left and the Canadian left and the left in general, who go down this line, there are not 52 genders. Also, their obsession with critical race theory, I think, is toxic, absolutely toxic. Telling white children that they're perpetual persecutors and minority children that they're perpetual victims, it's not good for anyone. Also, the Democrats' ties to Black Lives Matter, I would argue Black Lives Matter, for the most part, has been a negative movement. Not 100%. They did bring about some useful debates around police accountability, but unquestionably there are racist components in Black Lives Matter. They've had leaders in various chapters or groups across both the US and Canada coming out with outright racist bile against white people. Now, if Democrats say that they're anti racist, they should be anti racist across the board and not be okay with anti white racism. On the immigration issue, Zakaria said, too often these smug metropolitan, he didn't use that word, but it's what he was implying. These metropolitan liberal type Democrats, they would just look down on people for expressing concerns about immigration. We see very similar issues here. A lot of people who vote for Brexit said they were sick of being condescended to by, as they would see it, the elitist left. Um, I am convinced that the Democrats need to distance themselves from this sort of intolerant woke left ideology. I think it's going to be hard to shake it off completely because that contingent makes up a big part of their base. But there has to be a lot of moderate Democrats out there who probably have a similar mindset to me. They cannot stand Trump and they have a lot of traditional democratic viewpoints, for example, belief in universal healthcare, support for common sense gun control, that sort of thing. But they aren't on board with some of the extreme identity politics, which actually is the antithesis of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s message about, I don't think he would have approved of some of the mantra that's coming out from the woke left these days. Am I saying that that's what cost Harris the election? No, I think it was a combination of factors, but it certainly wouldn't have helped. Um, and in the end of the day, say what you want about Trump, but he does speak out against this stuff. So does Elon Musk, and so does other people around the Trump. You know, if anything, and I say this very cautiously because I am concerned about what direction Trump will go in, but if it forces the Democrats to wake up a bit, and I would like to see them move more to the centre. I mean, I think Harris herself and Joe Biden are relatively centre left. I don't think they're extreme left at all, but I do think they've both pandered to the extreme left. I do think they've both pandered to this intolerant woke ideology. I think, honestly, I think Biden and Harris are probably best described as centre left. Um, I mean, they're certainly not as hard left as, say, Alexandra Cortesio Cortez, someone like that. Um, I I don't think they could be put in that bracket, but they have pandered to the woke left. There's no question about it. Um, I don't say they should totally ignore it. They couldn't because it's part of their base. But it's like in Britain, it's been similar things. When Starmer took the knee, it was ridiculous, right? It puts me right off the political left. Um, and you see the situation even in places that held for the Democrats, like New York City. It was by a lesser margin than 4 years ago. So why is that happening? Well, there's rising crime rates. And when you see a situation, I've mentioned this before, when you get, for example, black offenders punching white people in the street, there's absolutely a media blackout on that. There's silence. It's barely covered, or when it is covered, race isn't mentioned. It's just like, oh, this is a crime problem. But if you had hate crime against black people, then that's all over. That's absolutely all over CNN and their pundits. The point I'm making here is isn't just the Democrat Party. Liberal left media outlets like CNN have to take some responsibility as well. And that's a point Zakaria negated to mention. His own network comes across as smug and elitist and all the rest of it. This elitist label, you know, Trump's Republicans aren't really in a position to lecture because Trump literally has the richest man in the world beside him. Apparently, Elon Musk was bribing people with a lot of money to vote for Trump. If that doesn't smack of elitism, I don't know what does. So I certainly don't think the Trump Republicans lecture about elitism. And then when you look at Trump himself, he's a billionaire who's, his family are all mega rich. It's hardly like he's a working man standing up for the working people or something like that. He's a brash billionaire who believes in privilege. I don't think it's this idea, and this is where I think that Trump supporters shouldn't be too smug. They may well find, I could be wrong, but they may well find in the next 4 years that Trump disappoints them. It's all very well to criticize the Democrats, and that's valid since they've lost, and they'll have to, bound back from their mistakes in 4 years. But I do think a lot of Trump voters are going to be very disappointed because there is a personality cult around him, and I think the hardcore supporters genuinely think he's a sort of Superman. There's another thing I've observed, which is this respect of power for power's sake. I've heard, like to Joe Rogan, for example. Rogan came out with this ridiculous statement about why he supported Trump. He said, "Oh, I look at Elon Musk. He's powerful. He's a powerful person, and that's why, yes, I'm voting for Trump." It's this kind of brainless argument of power for power's sake. I see a lot of that with Trump supporters. Um, he's brash, he's outspoken, he's and there's this admiration for it. So I think you do get that with it's it's kind of an admiration of power for power's sake. That's uh, well, that is what it is. I do not like that at all. I just hope the Democrats do learn some of these things. But I will say this: I do not think that they were wrong to point out Trump's character flaws. I do not believe they were wrong to remind voters that of what Trump done in 2021, his refusal to concede defeat, and all these little memes that are going around, all these smug videos about Democrats crying. Kamala Harris conceded defeat. That's the fundamental difference. She conceded defeat. I'm sure she would have been gutted. I'm sure her supporters would have been utterly devastated. But she conceded defeat. She respected democracy in a way that Donald Trump has utterly failed to do in the last 4 years. So I really don't think Trump supporters should be too smug. Also, he claimed that he was going to unify the country. Now, if you're currently making silly little memes about, mocking the left or going out of your way to laugh at your left wing neighbor, that's not exactly reaching out. It's not exactly unifying the country. So, I know some Trump supporters have replied to my videos. I would respectfully say to those people, if you're really about unifying, then instead of just laughing at the other side, maybe try and understand their concerns. Maybe try and understand why people who may have relatives who are on the verge of being deported have serious concerns. Maybe try and understand why young women have serious concerns about reproductive rights and so on. I'm not saying that's the number one thing they were interested in, but it's a big thing. So if Trump supporters are going to hold up the mantle of Trump himself, then prove it. You know, I'm not saying you have to go and hug a Democrat, but if you're, making these pathetic little memes, then it's not exactly doing much to mend divisions in America, is it? I mean, I'm under no illusion that I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. And if Trump carries out some of these extreme policies that he's proposing, I do think it's extreme to propose mass deportations. Deportations of criminals, I totally accept. In fact, migrants themselves would support that. But I just think that throwing out someone who's been in the United States for years, yes, technically they broke the law, but if they're not actually hurting anyone in the sense that they're not a violent criminal and they are, working menial jobs, they're paying into the American economy because they'll be buying things. So that, I just don't think it's very practical, and I think it is callous to just throw them out. I think what Harris proposed, an earned path to citizenship, is more sensible. So I do think Trump supporters are going to be disappointed by this. They're going to find that these mass deportations aren't going to happen, at least not to the extent. I don't think you're going to get 11 million people thrown out. Um, and around the world, there's concern. In Ukraine, there's significant concern. It remains to be seen what exactly Trump will do, but the fear is he will just throw Ukraine under the bus and let Putin take it, basically. In Britain, we've got concerns about huge tariffs being thrown at this country, which is why I think Starmer is justified in having a reset with France and Germany. Um, Frankly, even a Democrat president, it's never going to be in level playing field when it comes to trade with America because they're a much bigger economy than we are. So in Britain, we need to be realistic about that. I won't lie. I do think that in this election, a lot of voters have just decided character doesn't matter. We're going to give this guy a chance. We know he's full of it. We know he's a liar. We know he says awful things. But you know what? It might be good for the economy. I hope ordinary people struggle less. I mean, I really do. But I do think a lot of people are going to be disappointed. And, the best case scenario is there's a little bit of hyperbole and things won't be as bad as people think. But given the character of Donald Trump, given what we know about this man, given what the way he's behaved in the last 4 years, it's hard to believe that there isn't going to be some very troubling things happening. All I can say is thank goodness for the 22nd Amendment that he only has 4 years, and in 2028 he can't stand again. I envisage a situation where it will be Gavin Newsom versus JD Vance. But by that point, Newsom will have to have really improved the situation in California. Otherwise, he's going to have an uphill struggle. That's my thoughts at the moment. I am absolutely not happy about Trump's win. I think it's fairly depressing. I see it as um, a man who's morally bankrupt being rewarded with 4 more years in the most powerful job in the world. I think it's a very sad thing. But, I'm not American, and if I was struggling I can't judge people who voted for him because I might have, as a last resort, maybe done that if I was really struggling. So I can't judge that. But the Democrats need to introspect with some of the things I've said, definitely on the identity politics and woke zealotry. But I would say Trump supporters really shouldn't be too smug about this, especially if they're really serious about unifying. Otherwise, it's just hot air.